Are you interested in effortlessly growing your Bitcoin portfolio? I sure am. The Bitcoin credit card by Gemini earns you Bitcoin back on every purchase. Use it like any credit card. Buy lunch, gas, or your weekly groceries, and you'll earn up to 4% back instantly in Bitcoin or one of over 50 other cryptos straight to your account. All that with no annual fee, and right now you can grab a $200 Bitcoin welcome bonus. It's the easiest way to start building your Bitcoin stack. Go to Gemini.com/card to learn more. Terms apply. See the link in the description for more information regarding rates and fees.
Hey, warmer brother, hello! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you as we're going to be joined in a few minutes by one of our good friends, Ryan McIntyre. He does such great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, and my goodness gracious, this is a man that does such an incredible job of being able to take a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. I know that he is very locked in terms of everything that we're seeing in this fine game. He's doing a lot of conference previews with our good friend Kobe Dan over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, so we'll talk about a few of the ones that he did, maybe a few underrated teams. We're also going to be talking about just how big chemistry and overall coaching is early on during the season, why he likes to be able to bank on that. We're also going to be chatting with him about some of the differences that he has with getting prepared for this upcoming season rather than past off seasons, with just the amount of transfers that we've had, the changing landscape that we have been seeing in college sports in general, and then we're going to be diving in with him on the landscape of the Big Ten, because I do think that there's a big giant middle there. He also thinks that there's going to be a lot of intrigue on that front. And additionally, we're going to be talking about the improved SWAC, though we do have to talk about the fact that Grambling loses a 20-point scorer in Paul McMillan as well. So lots to be able to chat about today. If you do like hearing from his fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we all fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at GUNet_81. Keep in mind, letters the name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline, and the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Did not get in any Twitter/X questions today, but everything is powered by EdgeBoost. EdgeBoost is making sure that bettors are able to have access to their funds whenever and wherever. With EdgeBoost, they make sure that 100% of gambling transactions do get approved, and you do get cashback rewards as you utilize EdgeBoost. And when you go to edgeboost.bet, put in that promo code of Greg, G-R-E-G. That'll get you a dollar for dollar match on your first deposit up to $25. Now let's chat with our good friend Ryan McIntyre, and I mentioned the great work that he does over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, but on top of that, he also does a great job with the Ryan and Rush Show. For anyone that's a fan of West Virginia athletics, he does an amazing job on that front as well. You're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at Moneyline_Mac. That is spelled M-A-C on Mac. And Ryan, always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much.
I always appreciate it, Greg. We're getting close, man. We're getting there.
Yes, we certainly are. And as we get closer and closer to the upcoming college basketball season, have there been a few things that you've been taking a look at this offseason that maybe you haven't in the past, / has there been anything that you've had to do that has been a little bit different this offseason than in past offseasons?
I feel like each year is different, and it gets crazier and crazier as you go league by league. I think we're, 14 leagues in, so we still got 17 to go here in the last 3 weeks. But there's just so much roster turnover, especially at the mid-major level, with guys trying to transfer up, and you just don't see that much returning production in a lot of these leagues. We just did the Sun Belt, and that league is just crazy with all these roster turnovers.
Absolutely, and I was noting that with the SoCon as well, a league that I know that we both very much love, and other than Furman and for less of a extent, Western Carolina, there's not a lot coming back, and that is a team of Western Carolina that I think that they're going to be probably picked towards the bottom of their conference. There's probably not going to be a lot of expectations, and I think it's teams like that that really show a lot of value. I'm not sure how you view things early on during the season, but a team like a Western Carolina is probably going to be a team that I back quite a bit as big giant underdogs.
Yeah, and Greg, I'm known to back cultures and back coaches more than ever. I think the more and more we get into this era where we get a new roster year in and year out, I think that's going to be my kind of just blindly tailed coaches that I trust, that have proven year after year that they can win with a new roster, get guys to buy in, because the average team has 8, 9, 10 new players. So, I mean, I'm just going to start blindly, I think, backing coaches and culture programs that just prove it year after year.
And I'm so glad that you mentioned that, as Ryan McIntyre, who does such great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, he's joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. Who are a few of those coaches that you really do gravitate towards? Because you've got some big name coaches, you've got some small name coaches, and I know you, being a man that was on the West Virginia coaching staff for a while, you know all about very good coaching. Are there a few in particular that you're looking at and you're just going to be willing to buy in their culture this year?
Becker at Vermont's always a guy. I mean, last year they had pretty much every injury. They still finished third in that league. I always back the Colgate culture. Last year it felt like everybody returned everything, and the Colgate still was able to be a top 3 team. Another guy that I have a lot of respect for, that at the high major level, that is proving year after year that he can turn over a roster, get him back to the dance, is Chris Beard. And I'll go over to the other Mississippi State team is Chris Jan. So the two Chris's down there in Mississippi, those are the two guys at the SEC level. And then I always like Colgate. I always like Vermont. I'll probably end up back in Gonzaga a bunch here with Mark Few, just because I think he just has such a good job year after year. But I think coaching is getting more and more important, and culture more and more important in college basketball.
Yep, I do fully agree with you there. And I do think that it is going to be really interesting to see what we get moving forward, because one guy whose culture I'm very much trusting in this year is out of Kentucky with Mark Pope. I thought he did a really good job in year number 1. Now, Jaden Quantance has been dealing with a little bit of injury. We don't know what his availability is going to be moving forward, but we did see Andre Jelovich, the international man of mystery, who's 6'11". He's going to be eligible right away. They bring in a star freshman in Malachi Moreno, who's truly 7 feet tall as well. And how do you take a look at a Kentucky team that had a lot of production last year? They didn't necessarily have the world's best low post play, but the guard play was rock solid. And now they bring back Otega Owe to go along with, shall we say, a revamped low post.
Yeah, and you can tell that Mark Pope didn't like his defense last year with some of these gets. So I love Kentucky this year. I think they're going to take a big step. I think Mark Pope's a really good coach. You mentioned it, culture. I thought he did a great job at BYU, got those guys to buy in. And I think he's just made for this roster, or made for this era. And he's made for Kentucky. He played there. He lived it. He won a national championship there with Rick Pitino. He was the captain. So they're an easy team to root for now. I never thought I would say that with Kentucky, but with Pope there, I do like seeing Kentucky good under Mark Pope.
Yep, absolutely. And I do think that with Kentucky, it is going to be a big year for them. I am very excited about this team, because even bringing in the likes of Denzel Aberdeen along Jalen Lowe, I think that that really elevated this roster as well. And then the man they used to coach over at Kentucky does not anymore, John Calipari over at Arkansas. It was a rough first year for him in terms of the early going. He was able to get things going late. And how do you take a look at this bunch? Because they actually do return someone in DJ Wagner that was a former top 25 recruit, did follow him on over from Kentucky. You've got the likes of Trayvon Brazil. And I look at this Arkansas team, and I think that they might be one of the more fascinating teams in the country.
They are, and I think Cal's got a really. I think all these guys headed into year number 2 are going to take big steps. I think they all hit home runs in the portal. So I agree with you. I like Calipari's team in year number 2. I know the situation didn't end well at Kentucky, but he did a great job there overall. And so I'm with you. I'm going to buy into Arkansas here. Coming off a Sweet 16, they were playing as good as basketball as anybody in the country down the stretch. Really put a scare there. They beat St. John's and then almost beat Texas Tech.
And I do think that this is an SEC that in general is just so fascinating, because I take a look at this conference and I really think that the difference between team number 1 and team number 2 and say team number 8, team number 9 is about as thin as it gets in all of college basketball, because I'm not sure where Vanderbilt is going to be placed in that preseason poll, but that's a team that I'm very bullish on. Who knows how to be able to take a look at Auburn with Stephen Pearl now taking over for Bruce Pearl, but what we do know is that that's still a good roster. Sean Miller takes over at Texas. Georgia's a team that I'm actually willing to buy in on Mike White, because it feels like he's done a little bit more with less over at Georgia as well. How do you take a look at the overall landscape? Because I think that this is going to be one of those conferences where the underdogs are going to cash quite a bit, because the difference, in my opinion, between those middle teams and the top teams just doesn't feel that great right now.
I completely agree, and I think you could say that in the Big 12 as well. And maybe not so much the Big 12, but just some of these power leagues, just with the coaching that's so good. The SEC's got guys that have been to Final Fours. Now they got a bunch of roster turnover to go in with some of these coaches. So I'm with you. Last year, the SEC was the best league in America. I think they have a chance to duplicate it again. I think them and the Big 12 are going to lead the way. It's going to be fascinating to watch.
Yep, and I remember we talked about this, I think it was a week or two ago, about the Big 12 perhaps having the, shall we say, better top teams, but the SEC perhaps having a little bit more depth, and I think that is going to be a fun race to be watching, as we do have Ryan McIntyre, who does such great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, and you were mentioning it with a lot of these power leagues just having a big giant middle, and when you talk about leagues having a big giant middle, you're obviously talking about the Big Ten. So our good friend Ryan McIntyre just did a nice job to be able to ease our way out of part number 1 and get into part number 2, talk a little bit about the Big Ten. We'll talk about how improved the SWAC is, the Paul McMillan injury over at Grambling is going to be hurting them, and just a few teams that he's feeling high/low on coming into the season. That's up next, right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the Beeson Family Podcast.
Are you interested in effortlessly growing your Bitcoin portfolio? I sure am. The Bitcoin credit card by Gemini earns you Bitcoin back on every purchase. Use it like any credit card. Buy lunch, gas, or your weekly groceries, and you'll earn up to 4% back instantly in Bitcoin or one of over 50 other cryptos straight to your account. All that with no annual fee, and right now you can grab a $200 Bitcoin welcome bonus. It's the easiest way to start building your Bitcoin stack. Go to Gemini.com/card to learn more. Terms apply. See the link in the description for more information regarding rates and fees.
Back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the Beeson Family Podcast, being rejoined by our good friend Ryan McIntyre. He does such good work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network with our good friend Kobe Dant on the show, The College Experience. He also does the Ryan and Rush show that is all dedicated to West Virginia athletics. Follow him on Twitter/X at Moneyline_Max, spelled M-A-C. And we left off talking about how the middle of these power conference leagues are so competitive and it's so good. And Ryan, you did a perfect job of teeing me up for this one because you were just describing a conference in the Big Ten that always is this way. We do know those top 2 teams. Purdue is going to be your clear number 1. Michigan's going to be that clear number 2. But I look at all those teams in the middle, your Illinois, your Wisconsins, your Iowas, Michigan States, insert your favorite team here. And I think that is going to be just a very fun race to see what teams finish like 3 through 10, because that feels like a conference where 1 or 2 bounces the right/wrong way can really cost you like 5 spots in the standings. And you mentioned good coaches. I feel like the Big Ten really did a nice job in terms of all the teams that needed a coach this offseason, making a good hire.
Yeah, once again, we agree. And when I said the Big 12, I meant the Big 10. Outside of Purdue, and you got a lot of good coaches. These programs don't mess around anymore. If somebody's not getting the job done, they go out and get a coach that can get them to where they need to be. You can flip a roster in a year. Ben McCollum coming into this league now. And you got a bunch of year number 2 coaches that I think are going to be really good. Dusty May, once again, got to the Sweet 16. Sprinkle out there at Washington. He's won wherever he's been. So I'm with you. I think the Big Ten is fascinating this year.
Oh, absolutely. And when it comes to the Big Ten, I think that it's just so big that they do have a few more up-tempo teams. And how do you take a look at a team like a Wisconsin that we've been talking a lot about chemistry, we've been talking a lot about familiarity, and Greg Gard has obviously been there for quite a while, but we saw them change their style a little bit, and I think that it's interesting to watch them this year to see if they play the same style that they did last year or if they go back to the same old clunky Wisconsin way, because that was really a revelation and one of the more surprising things, in my opinion, that we saw in all college basketball last year.
You know what I love about you, Greg? You always get a Wisconsin question in there. I love it. I love your loyalty to the Badgers. I agree. I think it'll be more of the modern day. I think that they found some success with it. And I just think with these teams from the West Coast, they want to play more up and down as well. So I think it's more of what we saw last year. I think Guard's doing a good job adapting to the times. And this is not your old Wisconsin team that just wants to walk the ball up and down the court and see if they can win a game 50-49.
Yep, I mean, man, that was such an interesting turn of events last year for Wisconsin. Now, they're not going to have John Tonje, but they do have another John Blackwell, who's going to be back, and that is going to be absolutely massive for them, as we do have one of our good friends, Ryan McIntyre of the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, and we did see some news over the last few days. This is very much at the lower major level, but I mean, it's news whenever a guy averages 20 points per game the previous season. Looks like he's going to come back, but does not, and that would be Paul McMillan. He was heading on over to Grambling. He's decided that for personal reasons, he's going to be taking the season off. And how do you take a look at Grambling and the entirety of the SWAC, a SWAC conference that you know as much as I do, typically gets a 16 seed, but it just feels like there's so much more talent in that conference this year. And that, in my opinion, is a big blow for a Grambling team that they did, in my opinion, a very rock-solid job of hiring on Patrick Curry in the offseason. But that is always rough when you lose a guy that averaged 20 points per game the previous season.
That might have been one of the most underrated coaching jobs what Query was able to do last year at FAMU. They were
with
horrible.
Almost no contract, too.
I know. It was remarkable. So, yeah, I'm a big Query guy. I think he's a really good coach. I'm interested to see what happens in that league. I think Bethune is way better than they were. I think Bethune's a really talented roster. I think Texas Southern's talented again. Southern's talented again. And then I think both Alabama. It's Alabama A&M with Dante Jackson going over there, and then in Alabama State with Tony Madlock. I think they're going to be competitive. But I actually got Mo Williams and Jackson State winning it this year.
Yeah, and I want to dive in on that a little bit further because I had Rocco Miller, who does great work over at Bracketeer.org on a few days ago as well, and he was talking about the same thing because I do think that Bethune-Cookman has a little bit more talent overall than a team like a Jackson State. With Southern, you've got a lot of returning guys there, and Texas Southern, they just always find their way towards the top of the conference. But talk to me about this Jackson State team with a guy in Deshaun Ruffin that we remember very well. Not only did he play at Ole Miss a few years ago, he was a starter and a rock-solid scorer over there, and even though they don't have a ton of size, in terms of mid-major backcourts, this is one of the better ones that you're going to find.
That's exactly it. I trust the backcourt, and I also just trust Mo Williams. He's been one of the better former player coaches coming up from the NBA. Last year, they finished right on the door, lost a tight game in the conference championship, just like South Carolina State in the MEAC. I just like the trajectory of this program. I like Mo Williams. They have an identity, and they got good guards.
Yes, they certainly do, and when it comes to former players, it's going to be very interesting to see what we get out of this conference because you've got Reggie Theus, who obviously spent quite a bit of time in the NBA. Charlie Ward goes on over there to Florida A&M, and I think that that's so interesting because whenever we see one of these big-time coaches heading on over to a small program, it feels like it goes one of two ways. Sometimes they just frankly don't care. They sort of mail it in, and they're thinking that it's just a fun thing to be able to do when in reality it's a lot of work. And then there are other guys that they really put their stamp on the program. Look no further than in football what Deion Sanders was able to do over at Jackson State before he was able to climb to Colorado. And I want to get your thoughts on this Florida A&M team because I do think that with Charlie Ward, he is a guy that's going to truly care. And I think that was big that for Charlie Ward, he was hired on in the state of Florida where he has so many ties playing over at Florida State.
And he was a high school coach. So I like Charlie Ward. I like the hire. I think they're able to build on what Query was able to do in year number one. And it seems like they're really investing. He's, like you said, he's connected there. He's one of their own in Florida. So, yeah, I like that hire, and I'm excited to see Charlie Ward, former Heisman Trophy winner.
You don't find a lot of former Heisman Trophy winners coaching college basketball. That has to be, maybe not a first, but if it's not a first, it's certainly a second. So that is going to be absolutely amazing to take a look at as Ryan McIntyre does such amazing work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. He's joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And Ryan, I know that you and Kobe Dan over there on the College Experience are doing exactly what I'm doing. You're doing a lot of conference previews. You're doing a great job getting set for the upcoming college basketball season. And I know you've been doing a lot of the mid-major previews over the last few days. And has there been a team or two that maybe you think would surprise a lot of people in terms of where you have them projected in their conference? And is there a few teams that you feel like are being slept upon that could really surprise this season?
Yeah, so we just got done with the Sun Belt, and Old Dominion has a lot of returning production coming back. I think Mike Jones is doing a good job there. I like Mike Jones and ODU to take a step here in year number two. I know JMU and Troy are always really good. I think that'll be a fascinating league. So Old Dominion, the Monarchs down there in the 757, I think they could compete for a Sun Belt championship. We also did the MAC. So, yeah, we did the Fun Belt and MACtion here over the last couple of days. I do have the Ohio Bobcats getting it done. Like Jeff Bowles, like the pedigree of that program. They've been knocking on the door to win the conference regular season title. They had a lot of injuries last year. I think if they stay healthy, they'll have a shot to win it. Love Akron, love Toledo, and just love all those Ohio schools.
And I am so glad that you mentioned Old Dominion because I picked them to win the Sun Belt as well. There's a lot of people are going to be picking like James Madison, Troy, something like that. And how big do you think that it is sometimes when taking a look at these conferences? So look at the style of play, because a big reason why I landed on Old Dominion is that even though they're going to be lacking something from 3-point range, it's just a conference in general that doesn't have a lot of 3-point shooting. And a big reason why I picked South Alabama at number 2 is that they have such a distinct style that they allowed, I believe it was like 50% of opponents' field goal attempts to come from 3. And that's knowing that the other teams in the conference really don't pop it from 3.
There's just a lot of variance in that league. It kind of, honestly, as much as I love the Sun Belt and coaches, that was one of the more painful previews just because of all the roster turnover and trying to dissect who and what. Sun Belt, high variance league. Last year we saw a 4-way tie for first place. It wouldn't surprise me again if we had a 4-way tie for first place.
Oh, yes, and I do have to get your thoughts on this as well because the American is going to it. How do you like that Sun Belt Conference tournament style where you essentially have the stepladder format where everyone gets in, but if you're like, say, the 12 seed or the 11 seed, good luck trying to get to the final. And I think that that's the way that things should be done in college basketball to reward those teams and give those top 3, top 4 seeds the best chance to be able to make the NCAA tournament, especially from the one-bid leagues.
I like rewarding the top 4 to a certain degree, but I don't like that format. I think that's a little too far. And especially in a league where I think it's usually pretty wide open. Like last year, the 1 and 2 seeds really didn't earn those double byes. They tied for, and they didn't all get to play each other. So it wasn't really a true champion. And then Ark State and Troy had to win an extra game, even though they shared the regular season title. I just like having the top 4 as a bye, just because usually you're not going to get a 5-way tie for first place. I do agree. You want to take care of your top guys that earned it over a 5-month sample size, but I think the Sun Belt's a little too far, if that makes sense.
Yep, exactly. And with the American Conference, that's going to be so interesting as well. Imagine the last seed being able to win that conference tournament. They'll probably need to win more games in that conference tournament than they had won in conference play all season long. So we got a lot of good, clean family fun coming up for this upcoming season. And Ryan, you're doing a great job of previewing it all. You do great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, the Ryan and Rush Show. I know that is dedicated all to West Virginia athletics as well. So let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Always appreciate it, Greg. Yeah, season's right around the corner. Go check us out over at the College Experience, college football year-round, college basketball year-round. Heck, we even do college baseball. So college hoops can't get here soon enough. Can't wait for early November.
Absolutely. And Ryan, he does such an incredible job taking a look at this great sport of college basketball. And every single time he joins me, he runs such great insight. So big thanks to Ryan for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. And if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of 2 ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, Larry the naming does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is via an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. I am with you guys every single day on this podcast, regular season and off season. We're down to just one conference preview remaining. That is going to be the Big Ten, so be on the lookout for that sometime in the next week or two. And hey, 3 weeks from now, you're getting picks and analysis on every single game, every single day. That first Monday in November is when it all gets started, so very amped up about that. I am doing my best to get you guys set for the upcoming season, so I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.